Hi again. So now let's talk about your medium choices. Your medium choices are pretty limited, but they're the easiest ones that I could think of for you to be successful with this project. If you know more than I know that I'm going to show you with these mediums, you're more than welcome to move beyond what I'm going to show you. If you've got acrylic paints or temperas or any other paint, you can use that instead of what I'm going to show you with watercolors. Let's take a look at these mediums I've got selected that I've already mentioned on our assignment at Canvas. First off, I recommend that you use watercolors. It's going to be easier to do color mixing. It's going to be easier to brush it in place if you follow my steps. And honestly, I think it'll go faster for you and be more effective than some of the others. But that doesn't mean you can't do some of the others instead. When you choose a medium, you only get to use one. So don't use some of this and some of this and some of that. I want you to choose one medium and stick with it for this project. All right? So let's talk about the watercolors first. With the watercolors, remember I asked you to go to MA and go to the office and pick up your portfolio of artwork and your sketchbook and take it home. And I also asked you to get some watercolors and some more paper for this project. So that's what this is for. Now your watercolors that you got might not be in a perfect shape like these are, but they should work well enough for you to complete this project with no problems. If when you've finished with them you want to keep the colors, you're welcome to, but don't just throw them away. If you decide you don't want to keep them, maybe find a relative who might enjoy them or bring them back next school year to my classroom. You'll also need a watercolor brush. Now most of the watercolor sets came with this really crappy little orange brush, and it doesn't do a really nice fine job. So I also put out and asked you to take home another brush that was available there. There were 2 or 3 different kinds of brushes besides this one that you could choose from. And if you have a good set of brushes at home, you can use them too. You'll need a container of water, and I want to just show you some techniques with them. So I'm going to move the other mediums out of the way for the time being. You shouldn't have all this stuff on your table when you're working. Try to have a nice setup place that you're working. So with my color scheme, let's just say I want to use orange as a monochromatic color scheme. I still need to make variations of that color scheme with how I apply them to the paper. Let's zoom in a little bit here and turn just a bit. All right. So with this, I've already started it so you wouldn't have to sit here and watch me do all of the work. But what I've got for us here is I've got watercolor right here. It's pure with no white in it, no black in it. It's the pure application of it. And we called this technique, when I put it straight on the dry paper, wet on dry, because the paper's dry and it pulls it down and makes it more opaque color use. Now, there are ways to change that, so let's talk about that. When you pick up your color, you want to, when you first apply it, you want to get some water in your brush, tap out the extra so it doesn't dribble everywhere, and you just pick up your color, and I'm going to show you a wet on dry here in this empty space, all right? So you want to have it a little bit wet, but not too wet, but you need enough paint that you don't run out. When you're painting, if you remember what we did previously, what you do is you pull your brush towards yourself right along that shape, and then you stop before you get to a line that goes another direction. Turn your paper so you can see where your brush is going. Put your brush down and pull it right along that edge. Create the edge of the shape with your brush bristles, and you'll be able to control where it goes better by turning your paper. I started to run out of pigment, so I just loaded up my brush again. Oops, let me lift it up so you can see. All right, and I just pull the brush right along the shape's edge, and I fill it in where it didn't quite go to at the edges, and then I just quickly fill it in from side to side. I have to do this before the paper dries, and even though that was wet on dry paper, it might still have enough pigment that I might want to manipulate it by twisting and turning it so that it fills it in evenly. So that's wet on dry. Our different technique, remember, you always want to clean out your brush even if you're going to use the same color, because the other one, like I showed already here, is called wet on wet. We did that when we did the pumpkin painting last semester. You put first off, you get the pigment all set up and ready to go. So saturate your cake of pigment. Now remember, if you're going to mix 2 colors together, like if you wanted it to have more yellow in it, you would put some of the paint there, more and more and more, and then clean out your brush, and then you'd get more yellow to make it a lighter version of orange, or you could get more red and make it a redder version of orange. All right. So you want to saturate your cake of watercolor first. Then get your paint with fresh water, your paintbrush with fresh water, and you just paint it like you were going to be able to see it. You paint the water in place. Don't get it too wet that it runs around on you. Okay, the paper we're using for this is not watercolor paper. It's good drawing paper, but it's not watercolor paper, so you don't want it to get too wet. And then you tap out the extra water, you get a little bit of the pigment in your brush, and you do the same thing we did with the wet on dry. You just paint right along those edges, right? Pull towards yourself, you can see where you're going. Turn your paper so you always can see where your brush is, where the bristles are. For those of you who never do this, and some of you did that in our previous projects where we worked with paint or other mediums where you needed to see where you were going, you forgot to turn your paper, and you ended up not being able to control what it was doing. So now you can see it's a little bit lighter than that one was, but it's still darker than that one. Now here's a tip. If you go too dark with it, while it's still wet, you can clean out your brush, you can tap out the extra water, and you can do what's called mopping. I'm lifting up the extra water and pigment off my paper with a pretty dry brush. It's not completely dry, but it's pretty dry. And notice now that it's a lot less orange, a lot less pure, but it's still orange, right? And if I have areas that I don't want them to be lighter or darker, I can tilt it, twist it, turn it, but I want to make sure that it's still wet to be able to do that. And I have to be thoughtful about other places where I might have already painted too, right? So that's how you make tints of watercolor. Now let's just say I wanted to make a shade of watercolor, and maybe I want to put a little dot inside that one that's already dry. It has to be dry before you paint on top of it, otherwise it just spreads out like our pumpkin project. So let's just say I wanted to have a shade of orange. So what I do is, like I said before, I want to pull my pigment into the tray lid, right? I need a little bit more water. Do that. And I'm going to drag off the excess orange so I don't just waste it by cleaning it out of my brush. Now I clean out the brush before I go to the next color so I don't contaminate that next color. Some of you forgot to do that in our last project too. So that's a lot of black. So I'm not going to put all of it right on top of that orange. I'm going to do it off to the side, just tapping it out. And now I'm mixing it right into the orange that's on my palette lid, and I can check to see if it looks dark enough on the paper. If I want it to be a little darker, I can pick up more of the black. And then like I said, maybe I want to just do a little circle right in the middle here. All right, so there I now have a pattern inside of a pattern that I already did. Now if I don't want that to spread out and feather out, the first color needs to be absolutely dry before I go on to it. Otherwise, it's going to spread out. And if you like that, it can make some pretty interesting patterns too, right? It just kind of fades out and it moves around. So it's less hard edge than the other technique. All right? So that's with the watercolors. Let's talk about color pencils real quick. Remember, you're choosing one color scheme. And I've already chosen my color scheme, and I once again went with orange, and I decided I'm going to do a monochromatic color scheme with orange for all of these, just as an example. So my next step is, once I've got my color orange, the one that I'm going to use from the pack, I also get a gray one, a white one, and a black one. And just like our drawing pencils, it tells you what color they are on almost every pack of color pencils that you could find. I happen to be using Prismacolors, but you could use crayon color pencils. They don't have to be art quality. They can be starter quality. When you're applying your color to the surface, here's what you do. You're going to be doing it not necessarily on its side for a tone, but with the edge. It depends on which kind of color pencil you have. Some of them are softer than others. So what I'm doing is I'm just going side to side, filling up the paper with a nice light value, I'm not pressing hard. None of these were pressed hard, okay? So I'm just applying the color straight onto the paper right next to itself. I'm just doing lines of color, but if you look closely, the lines don't show up, right? The lines don't show up. This is the one I'm doing right here. And if they do, they shouldn't. Notice I went kind of fast, but I didn't get along the top edge here, and the top edge here and the bottom edge here. So what I could do is I could take my pencil and go sideways with it and go right to those edges that I didn't touch first. And I do it up here too. And if they show up as being lines going two different directions, you can blend them in a little bit by just going back down on top of the first one. I'm not pressing hard at all. I'm just letting the pencil touch the surface. It's kissing the surface of the paper, and it's made a nice light value of orange. It's lighter than that one, which is lighter than that one, which is lighter than that one. To get it to be that dark, I started off with a light value like that. But I went a second direction with my lines, not pressing harder, just more color pencil right on top of the first color pencil. This is called overlaying, if you remember that from when we did pastels. So the colors go right on top of each other. You can go right in a second and a third direction, a fourth direction, and you can make it as dark as you want or as light as you want. But go right up to the edges as neatly as you can. Don't go outside of them. Stay inside of those shapes as well as you can. I want to see that you can control your mediums. With the crayons, it's a lot harder to do just that, but you can still do it. Once again, I'm using a monochromatic color scheme, so I've got an orange crayon, a white one, a gray one, and a black one, okay? Black and gray. So I've got 4 colors to do a monochromatic color scheme. Now, if I was doing the orange and blue color scheme for a complementary color scheme, right, then I would practice both of them here, and I would use them with white, black, and gray too. But I'm doing just a monochromatic. Remember, you get to choose between all of the different color schemes and your choice of colors that works within it. So as you're applying the colors with the crayons, it just means you take it a little bit slower. You don't press hard. I know as a kid, when I was a little kid crayon coloring, I used to press really hard and I'd break my crayons all the time because I was pressing too hard with them. It's easy to press hard and to make it go dark really fast. So you have to tell yourself, slow down, take your time, do it deliberately rather than haphazardly. Okay? So I'm going right lightly, going right along the edge, and I turn my paper so I can see where that edge is. If I continue drawing this way, my chances of going outside of the line are too big. So I'm going to turn it the other way so I can see where my crayon's tip is, so that I can go right up to the edge. So now, I want to make it a little bit oranger right in the center there to match up. And I can go different directions to fill it in. Okay? So now I've got a nice range from the purest orange to a really light tint of orange along there. To get it to be that one, I just keep applying more layers of orange on top of it without pressing hard. Okay? Stay inside your outlines as you do it, and go right up to the outlines that you've already drawn in pencil with the colors. Remember, you can leave some of the shapes white, pure white if you want to. It's good for contrast if you do. But in some places you might want to go with black or with gray too, just without mixing them in with the color. Now let's just say you wanted to lighten that up even more than it is. After you've got that there, you can use your white crayon and you can go on top of it and you can lighten it up just like we did with the oil pastels. You can lighten it up. You could put the white first too, and it does it even more dramatically. Okay, so that lightens it up. Let's just say we wanted to darken it up. After you've got the orange in place, you can come in with your with a black or with a gray for a tone. I'm just going to do half of it to show you what I mean. Going right up to the edges, making it a nice even application of it. I would do the whole shape that way. And then I get my orange back in my hand and I blend it in. And this makes a shade of the orange crayon. Don't look for a darker version of orange. Make a darker version of orange with the crayon or with the color pencil by adding it on top of it. You could do the same thing with the color pencil here. Okay? And you want to make sure that it's nice and evenly applied. So if it shows a little bit differently, you can always come back in with the black or with the orange to blend it in. So now you can see I've got a darker version of orange working right there. It's not black, it's not gray, it's not pure black or gray, it has orange in it. All right. With the color markers, once again, a color scheme. Here's the problem with color markers. Once I put a color down, if I put another color on top of it, it's going to pick up the first color and mess up the tip of the second color. So I don't recommend that you use color markers. If you do use color markers, maybe you don't mix them in with your colors. Maybe you do like our example here. Maybe you have some pure black, some pure white, and some pure application of your marker colors. Maybe you're doing orange and blue again for a complementary color scheme. So you would have pure orange, pure blue, pure black, and the white of the paper, and maybe some gray. So I don't recommend you use the markers, but if it's the only material you have to do this work, then of course you can do it. When you're applying the marker, same thing goes. When you're applying it, make sure you watch where it's going. And you just gently overlap each stroke and turn your paper so you can see where it's going. And then when it dries, you will see a little bit of those lines where it overlapped, but you can't really see them all that well here. They won't be as strong here once it's dried too. Okay? Now if I wanted it to be a darker version or a purer version of orange, I just go right on top of it so that the white paper is really saturated with the orange, so that it looks as orange on the paper as it does on the marker's tip. Okay, so those are your four color medium choices: watercolors, color pencils, crayons, or watercolors. These are the ones that I would recommend. These are good alternative. These are okay, and these only if you absolutely have nothing else that you can use. I will be reminding you when it's time to turn this in, but let me just take a moment to remind you that if you haven't finished any of the previous work, your last chance to get it turned in to get a grade for that work that we've done since we've been on distance learning is May the 29th. That's the last date for anything. Now, if you've been holding off on doing some of the work because you saw May the 29th as the last day to turn stuff in, you haven't been really paying attention. The due date is on the Canvas assignment in a different place than the last available date. They're different days. Last available means the last time I'll take it from you. The due date means when I think you should be ready to turn it in so I can grade it. All right? So if you have any difficulties with this, took my glasses off so I could see. If you have any difficulties with this, send me an email. But also, you might want to go to YouTube and look at some of the videos that other people do with patterns. Maybe you don't know how to draw a pattern, so go to YouTube and look at a video that shows how to draw patterns. Most of them are done by artists who are showing you pretty extreme, complicated pattern development. So you have to take that in mind. All right? Let me know if you have any questions or problems. Take care. Good luck. And don't forget the due date for this project. I think it's the 25th, if I remember correctly. All right? Bye.